What? No, Bandai. The low turnout of these regionals, trust me, nothing to worry about. Everything's going to be fine. What's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another event coverage video. This time we're going to talk about the first weekend of the first season of the Bandai-oriented regionals leading up to the Nationals 2019 in October in Chicago. If you guys have not booked your flights yet, book your tickets. Make sure you do go whether you have an invite or not, because there will be a last chance qualifier at the event. And trust me, from last year, it's going to be super duper fun. Although I think that the turnout at Nats is going to be a lot smaller, because I do think Bandai dropped the ball with this past regional season. I think that's just blatantly shown from the turnout of these events. We had an open and invitational in Montreal. We had an open and an invitational in Columbus. And as far as I know, I don't think any of these events broke 50 players, which is kind of saddening to see, in all honesty. Like I said, I think Bandai kind of dropped the ball with this regional season. As far as I've heard, I can't really say much with concrete evidence, but there were some issues with tournament organizers trying to set up these events, so maybe it's a little bit of an issue on both sides. I don't know. I can't say that for sure, but I do think Bandai could have given us a regional season a bit earlier, because honestly, cramming only 2 months of regionals in to try and get your invite to nationals is a very, very small amount of time, and it doesn't feel good. All these trips that I'm trying to get towards these regionals, whether I'm trying to go to Florida or Virginia. I will be in Virginia, by the way, so make sure you guys come see me if you guys are at that regional, because it'd be awesome to see you guys. But it all feels so rushed and so crammed, and it's an unfortunate regional season. I do think the game will bounce back. I do think the game is in a better spot than it's almost ever been. Of course, there are annoying decks in the format. We're going to talk about all the decks that just pretty much establish themselves in the format as we go through this video. But I really think we are on the up and up. I do think that the game is constantly improving. I'm really excited for the ban list announcements that we're going to get right before set 7 drops, because I do think there are a few more things that can maybe be addressed. And these tournament results, to be quite honest with you guys, they don't show any type of tier 0-ness. They don't show any type of skewed format. Everything seems pretty fair and balanced. And I do think that everything in the format right now is beatable. I would just like to see us steer away a little bit from more of like the auto win matchups or more of like the auto loss matchups. But I do think we're moving in the right direction, because I do think everything has a counter. I do think that there are some decks in the format you can play that have a decent shot of beating almost everything else. But like I said, there are some exceptions with some auto losses. But the one thing we're gonna take away here is that these regionals and these events were very, very small. Like I said, I don't think any of them broke 50 players. So a little disheartening, but we're also gonna keep that in mind when we go over the tournament results, because as it seems, these were not the most competitive events that we've had compared to things like ARG Invitational or some of the circuit series reaching about 200 players or more. So we're going to keep that in mind, but this is the first string of regionals and the first string of events basically in the new competitive Dragon Ball season for the Dragon Ball Super National title. So that being said, we are going to treat this with some amount of importance, because it is important. This is the competitive event, the competitive landscape, and we want this to keep improving as we go on. So first thing we're going to talk about are the 4 winners of the weekend across all the different tournaments, right? So like I said, we did have 4 tournaments. We had an invitational and an open tournament in both Montreal and Columbus. So we're going to get right into the winners. So first thing, invitational in Columbus, we had Blue Skillless win the event, siding a small yellow package. So I doubt this was more of a build like mine, where it's just blue, yellow, straight aggro. This is probably also a Gogeta 7 build. And also, please forgive me, guys, because I'm working here with very, very limited information. There were no deck lists released, no official top cut standings released, unfortunately. So please do bear with me that I'm working with the best information that I have to try and get you guys this event coverage. But back to what I was saying, we have Blue Skillless siding a small yellow package, coming in first place at the Columbus Invitational. So it looks like Gogeta 7 put in a bunch of work there, because I'm assuming if you're maining blue and only siding into yellow, I'm assuming that you're main decking Gogeta 7. That's probably the most powerful bomb card that a Gogeta 7 Blue Skillless deck can play, right? I don't think there's many other powerful blue bombs that can quite end the game in mono Blue Skillless. Now, what I will say is, I think if we're looking at the ARG Invitational being the last major event, I think that Blue Skillless builds had to adapt in order to stay relevant. Like I said, it doesn't seem like Shenron Gogeta had such a huge representation in these events at all, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later. But I do think these Blue Skillless builds needed to adopt Objection in order to stay as fast as the Broly Victory Strike decks, as the Shenron Gogeta decks, because Broly Victory Strike, in my opinion, is not the worst matchup for Skillless, unless you somehow get stalled to 8 life and can't ever pick up 1 card off your life via your opponent attacking you or Self-Awaken. But Shenron Gogeta can be an incredibly hard matchup if you can't deal with their Shenron 4-drop and you just lose to triple attack, triple strike, crit. If you can't do anything to stop that, you are going to be in a bit of a tough spot. So going first as blue skillless, I think you need to adopt objection, possibly in the main deck, most likely in the main deck, in order to stay as fast as a deck like Shenron Gogeta that's going to basically auto win against you on turn 4, right? That's the idea, at least. In the Columbus Open, we had Broly, Height of Mastery, Victory Strike. Nothing too surprising there. This deck has shown itself to be one of the most powerful decks in the format coming off the ARG Invitational 2019. This deck has a ton of win conditions, whether it's Height of Mastery, whether it's Victory Strike, whether it's Mira, Creator Absorb, plus Double Strike, plus Battering Laser, plus Restanding with your leader. So you have aggro options and you have mid-range options. So no surprise this deck won. I do still think that this deck and Shenron Gogeta are the juggernauts of the format. They're kind of like the cap of the format, in the sense that these are the decks you need to be beating in order to take your deck to a competitive event, because these decks pretty much cap you at turn 4. If you're not doing something impactful, if you're not doing something incredibly OP by turn 4, if you're not setting your opponent back in a crazy position by turn 4, you're probably going to be in for a little bit of a rough time, because these decks are going to put that cap on you. You're either going to get swung at for 9 damage with a Height of Mastery or a Gogeta 7, or you're going to get Victory Strike. So like I said, I do think these decks are the caps of the format. No surprise at all to see Broly, Height of Mastery, Victory Strike win the Columbus Open. Now we'll move on to the Montreal Invitational. We had Janemba win the Invitational. This is something we haven't seen in a while, is a Janemba deck win an event, basically. But I do think that Janemba probably had some time to adjust to both Shenron Gogeta, which is definitely a tough matchup if you easily allow them to get to 4 life. Like I said, don't interact with the Shenron 4 drop. They're going to just pretty much 9-0 you with triple attack, triple strike crit. Same thing with Broly, Height of Mastery. This one can go back and forth either way, because let's just say you're the Broly, Height of Mastery player. If you open your Victory Strike and hold on to it, there's almost no way you should lose that matchup realistically. The flip side of that coin, though, is that if you never draw into Victory Strike, if your opponent mills it, if it's game 1 and you don't have Trunks Overseeing Time, or if they mill all of your Overseeing Times, that can put you in a pretty rough spot. So it seems like a pretty 50-50 matchup, maybe a little bit in the favor of Broly, Height of Mastery post sideboard, but even then, you could still get bad RNG. Your mills can still be terrible. You can get all your Victory Strikes milled. Well, obviously only one Victory Strike. You can also get all of your Trunks Overseeing Time milled. So the fact that Janemba came in and won here is kind of not super surprising. Also, against Shenron Gogeta, we saw this in previous formats where these Shenron Gogeta players would get the bad RNG of all their Gogeta 7s milled. So once that happens, you either have to Dangerous Journey Bulma them back into the deck and hope you draw them, or you have to wait till 7 energy to World Peace. And 7 energy to World Peace isn't the hardest thing against Janemba, especially when you're playing ramp, but basically Janemba adds a whole ton of variables that can change up almost anything at these events. So next up we have the Montreal Open winner, which was another Broly, Height of Mastery, Victory Strike deck. Pretty much already talked about it, but yeah, again, no surprise, this deck is super powerful. It's one of the most diverse decks in terms of win conditions in the format right now, so no surprise there. This is a deck that I think you should be trying to beat. So the field, we had a lot of different things in the field this time. Like I said, a smaller event, a little more casual. You probably saw a lot more local players show up to these events, especially in Columbus most likely, and also probably in Canada. It's a little harder for some of our East Coast players to get there, especially with some short notice. Also very, very difficult for our West Coast players to get there. So the West Coast is having their own regional come up very, very soon though, so stay tuned for that. I'm sure that's going to be a very competitive event. Shout out to Shenron's Lair heading out to the West Coast event. So the field, we had our usual suspects. We had skillless Janemba, which has kind of fallen off in the past weeks, but this week obviously made a very, very strong resurgence. Broly, Height of Mastery, no surprise there. And Dende Frieza took up quite a few spots in Top Cut as well, at least in Columbus. So these are the usual suspects. We've been seeing these decks perform very well back and forth. Dende, this deck keeps changing my mind every single week. I keep thinking the deck is better and better and better. But the one weird thing is that this deck seems to keep doing well when most of the field is skillless. I got a personal report from a friend that skillless was the most highly rep deck at Columbus. I can't really speak for Montreal because I don't have that information. But playing Dende Frieza into a field that consists mostly of your worst matchup is very, very gutsy. And that doesn't mean by any means you're going to face all skillless and just straight up get dumpstered. But it goes to show that like once you play against Broly Victory Strike, you do have a good matchup. When you play against something like Janemba, you can have a good matchup. So it is a little bit matchup dependent right now, but going back to that, personally being a skillless player against Dende Frieza never feels like an auto win as a skillless player. So it's a very grindy back and forth matchup. So Dende Frieza feels like a very good deck. It almost feels like the bottom tier of unfair decks because you can look at your opponent's hand every single turn and rip key pieces out of their hand. You get perfect knowledge almost every single turn. But in terms of Broly, Height of Mastery, Victory Strike, in terms of Shenron Gogeta, it can be a little bit rough. So that's just my opinion on Dende Frieza. It's been changing a lot over time. I do think the deck is actually very good right now. So I'll just leave it at that. We have a few newcomers to the scene at these events. So Broly BR, Green Broly BR seems to make a resurgence over the past weekend. This is a deck that we've seen miss top cut for the past few events in a row, but it seems like it's made a comeback. I think only with one top cut spot across the entire weekend. Someone correct me if I'm wrong though, that was all I was able to dig up. But like we've said in the past, this deck does lose pretty hard to sideboard. Just Killing Zone alone means that you can't Bloodlust any of your opponent's removal. So once they go into like their Bardock Fully Unleashed or their Dimensional Banisher Fu, whatever part of the chain you're on is automatically getting wiped. And that's why I think that Killing Zone kind of needs to go, because it does keep a deck like Green Broly pretty hard out of the format, as well as just, you know, restricting answers in general like Mutaito. But I did a whole video on this, so I'm not going to go too much into it. If you want to hear my opinion on that, go check out last week's video talking about the unhealthy cards in the format. But with that being said, I do think that Green Broly is pushed out of the format pretty hard right now. It's probably the most aggressive deck in the format, but like I said, it gets answered pretty easily by Killing Zone into your choice of removal. So it made a smaller resurgence, but I don't think we should expect to see it stick around too much. Next up, Slug also made a comeback with one spot in the top 16 across all 4 of these events. And announcer, shout out to Scott Dashy, announcer made it to top 4 in Montreal at the Invitational, I believe, not the Open, at the Invitational. So shout out to Scott Dashy with a really cool deck. Announcer has a very powerful wing condition coming out of the WMAT Power Booster. That is being the objection into turn 4 on your turn 3, playing the new Bobbity to bring out your triple showdown, your triple strike Supreme Showdown guys on turn 3. So that's basically 35k, 2 35k triple strike swingers on top of any other pressure you're able to put on the first 2 turns. Maybe turn 1 you had an Awakening Talipan, you're swinging with your leader every single turn just to make them take damage to 6, and if you can 6-0 someone, especially something like Janemba, that's proven to be a very powerful effect in the past. Note also that Bobbity protects your Supreme Showdowns from being KO'd the turn that you use it. So even though you can't play Cronoa in the deck, you do still have protection from like a Shugesh pop, for example. And there's nothing in the format that can Shugesh into warp removal as far as I know. So with that being said, you have a powerful win con. It's protected in general, which is really nice. So announcer is here. I do think it's a powerful deck. Shout out to you, Scott Dashy, once more. So Pan had a strong presence across all the different top cuts. I believe at least it made one spot in each of these top cuts. It might have missed one top cut in Montreal, but in Columbus it made 3 different top cuts in the Open, I believe. And yeah, I mean, Chain Zeno in a event this small, the variants that Chain Zeno introduces can benefit you more than it can hurt you, in my opinion, because over the course of a longer tournament, I think that the random variants Chain Zeno introduces is going to be a little bit more harmful than good. But in a smaller tournament like we saw this past weekend across all these different tournaments, like I said, I don't think any of them broke 50 players. I think that a deck like Chain Zeno Pan or Chain Zeno Hirudegarn, which also made one spot in top cut, is going to do pretty well for you. Next up, we have Toa, seeming like she's here to stay. Toa did very well. It got first seed at one of the Columbus events, played by Isaiah Herring. So this deck seems like it's here to stay, and it has a lot of answers to all the different decks in the format. So basically, on your Awaken side, Shenron Gogeta can never safely triple attack you because your leader is essentially a Godstrike Beerus. So they're only ever going to get 2 swings with the Gogeta 7 at most, or you can just take away the triple strike and make it a much less threatening attacker. Your opponent's basically going to blow their ulti. They probably won't be able to kill you that turn unless they have some type of god board set up with like another at all cost Vegeta or maybe a Gogeta 5 drop. But in most scenarios, you have so much removal in the Toa deck that they're not going to be able to have all that going into any given turn. So with that being said, Toa seems really good in that regard. Toa also has inherent answers to the Victory Strike deck because you can remove the keyword barrier from Path to Greatness and use any removal. You can either steal it with a Toa or you can remove it with a Mass Sand or a D-Banisher Fu, and then you can deal with it right then and there. You also have a very easy capability of maining minus Killing Zone, so Bloodlust is almost going to be a non-factor for you. I think any Toa build should probably be main decking 2 minus Killing Zone. That seems like a very fair bet. And then across the rest of the format, you have Crisis Crusher for Skillless. You have Warp Removal for Dende Frieza so that they can't recycle their Friezas. The deck just seems like it's in a very good spot. The only issue is I think it's going to have one of the smallest hands in the format, especially if you can't see your Vegeta time regulators. But I do think the deck is very powerful, so I do think that deck is here to stay. Next up, Shenron Gogeta was not very popular at this event. It didn't win any of the events, and I believe it only made one top cut across all 4 of the tournaments, which is kind of interesting to see. I do think it's one of the most powerful decks of the format, but to be honest with you guys, when an event is this much smaller of a caliber than typical, I do think that people's choices and people's what people want to play essentially is going to play much more of a factor. And in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, tell me if you think differently, Shenron Gogeta is a much more boring deck to play. For the first 4 turns, you don't do anything except set up. Turn 1, nothing really. Turn 2, Super Dragon Ball. Turn 3, Objection, or vice versa. Switch that order around. World Peace and a Shenron. And then turn 5, you play a win con. You give a triple attack. You just swing out for game, right? So it's not really the most fun deck to play, in my opinion. I do think that has a factor of why people won't play it going forward, because that type of deck is not the game that we love. In my opinion, it's not the type of deck that most players in this game really enjoy playing. It's not super interactive. It doesn't swing a lot. It doesn't combo a lot. It just kind of does its thing in one fell swoop. So I don't think people really enjoy that. And I do think at regionals, in most games, regionals are going to be affected by a fun factor, so to speak. So just my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong. To completely opinionated, but I do think it's one of the best decks in the format for sure. I am pretty surprised that I didn't see more slots in Top Cut. And finally, guys, Red Yellow Frieza Swap made a Top Cut at Columbus. That was pretty cool to see. I've always been a fan of the Red Frieza Swap deck. It might be one of the more aggressive decks in the format. Only thing that kind of sucks is that it probably does lose harder to Striving Goku, which is a mainstay in all Shenjita decks and in Janemba decks as well. So a little disheartening, but at the same time, it's probably one of your better aggressive picks, because most of these decks I don't think are playing more than like 2 or 3 Striving. 3 is being a little generous. I think 2 is probably the number they're at. So overall, guys, the events were super diverse in terms of what topped and what was played. We did see 2 Broly Victory Strikes win 2 of the events, but on the flip side of that, we had Skilless and Janemba win 2 other events. So at least the winning pool was a little bit more diverse. The top 16s were very, very diverse. Lots of different leaders. I don't think anything took up more than like 33% of Top Cut. So really, really interesting to see. Again, sorry I don't have all the concrete Top Cut positionings. Unfortunately, I was not able to get those. I scrounged to get as much information I could before bringing it to this video. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Hopefully this video tells you what to expect going into next week, basically, and the rest of the format. So guys, if you like this video, definitely let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Joey. This is Crossroad TCG, and I'll see you guys next time.
Hey, welcome to the end card, and thank you so much for sitting through that, because honestly, I'm just doing this until I make a Digimon trading card game. So if you like Dragon Ball Super for some reason, give it a sub up above, maybe check out some of our other content, and do not forget, Digimon is way better than Pokemon. With that being said, we will see you next time.